Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where the latest big swing of the title race pendulum took place. Stalemate at the Oval sees the Gibson Cup inch ever further towards the East Coast. We'll recap the latest as the crew's nightmare season saw the appearance of a couple of familiar ghosts over the weekend. We'll throw in an Irish Cup Semi-Final Preview for good measure, and there's a rather tasty plate of a weekly Irish League podcast to devour, known as Kick a Match. And we open the pod with a moment of silence in the company of Damian Mullan from the Coleraine Chronicle for the title race 2025-2026. It was here for a short time, but it was a good time all the same, Damien, wasn't it?
What are you trying to say, Peter? That Korean's title bid is over? Is that what we are? Is this what you have me on to talk about?
You know what? I prematurely stuck red and white ribbons on that Gibson Cup months ago, had a wobble. I'm back on what is pretty much a bandwagon, it must be said, within the media. Larne champions, kinda, sorta.
Do you want me to come out and say something? It's like Larne's to lose. Would that fit the narrative here then?
It was Larne's to lose weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that your boys in blue and white have been doing somewhat their best in recent times to try and get at it, but it's because of that big mound of points that Larne were able to amass, particularly before Christmas, that even that slight January-February wobble, they can just glide through all these other games. Their game against Cliftonville won't be the main one to talk about. We'll get to the game between Linfield and Glentoran in a bit. But yes, it's not actually over, but it's a long way to go for both Coleraine and Glentoran.
It is. It's a hell of a long way. And say, if you want me to sit here with a Korean hat on, for example, when you look at the table, there's a sizable points gap there between them. Larne's current form, a draw, 4 wins, and a bounce. That would tell you everything that you need to know. They're not sort of showing any signs of weakness, despite being the league leaders and the pace setters. And I haven't done the maths, but mathematically, I'm just thinking, another couple of wins, you would nearly see them all but mathematically confirmed. Listen, while it's still possible, like I'm not going to sit here. I'm not a football player. I'm not a manager. I'm not going to give you the spiel. It's like one game at a time, and it's all still to play for mathematically. But I think anybody looking at it at the table as we sit here today would say Larne definitely heavy favourites to win it. They've shown the form. They have the course and distance, if you like. They've won it on a number of occasions in the previous years, so they do know what it takes to get the job done. And it would be a monumental collapse now if they didn't win the league from here.
Set up beautifully, of course. Let's talk about the...
Rory Higgins told me to say.
It would be a monumental. Yeah, the one thing we can confirm is that you can add Linfield to the list of teams will not be winning the league.
They're 13 points behind Larne, I think, by my reckoning.
13 points off, only 12 to go. So they won't be winning the Gibson Cup, but we probably knew that a while ago. Then up we come, Coleraine, 34 games played, of course, for all these top teams. 68 points, 8 points off Larne with 76, and Glentoran now fall 6 points behind after the result on Saturday. We all expected Larne to get the result, and we all knew that the pressure was on Glentoran. At home, could they beat Linfield? They've had a number of bites at the cherry in recent times. They couldn't do it in the Cup, and even at home there on Saturday afternoon, they were just not able to do it. I think they were the far better team, but again, it was just a case of what their season has been like. They can create chances, they can get the ball in the box, they can defend resolutely at peak times. However, chances have gone gaping time and time again, and on Saturday, we saw a repeat of that 1-1, and they lose 2 more points in that chase of Larne.
Yeah, and it's strange that you say that too with Pat Hubin in their ranks as well. Obviously, the league's leading goal scorer. He's been in prolific form all year, but uh, from reading maybe perhaps some Glentoran supporters' views, there's a bit of concern that if Pat Hubin's not scoring goals, then perhaps there's not enough people in the team to score the goals that he's not getting. And I wasn't at the Glentoran Linfield game, obviously, on Saturday. I was covering a different game. But from what you're saying, it does sound like they created a sort of a number of chances, but just didn't have what it took to get over the line. And I guess, like any team, whilst it's good to have a goal scorer in your team, you can't obviously be overly reliant on one person, because if that person perhaps doesn't take the chances on that particular day, or the chances don't fall to him, you do need somebody that's going to help him out, and perhaps that was the case on Saturday at the Oval. I am not 100% sure, but I mean, I don't know about you, Peter, but I mean, if you were a Glentoran supporter, would you be getting worried at this stage of the season? Because obviously they lost the League Cup final, they're out of the Irish Cup. They were challenging Larne. They were probably Larne's closest rivals for a period of time in the league. Now, as you said, there's 6 points of a difference. They're dropping off slightly, 2 draws in their last 2 games. Do you feel a certain, maybe not discontentment, but a frustration around the Oval among supporters that, without wanting to join,
There's
without
di-
wanting to do a cliche, but people will tell you about Glentoran this time of the year, they seem to drop away. Is that something that you're picking up, do you think?
my temperature check is now that they've fallen further behind. Is there anybody from Glentoran that I've been talking to has felt, you know what, this isn't the usual form for us in that we are actually in this title race. We haven't totally, spilled our dinner all down ourselves. Yeah, you know what? There's a few moments where we've really missed the opportunity, but overall, this is a more coherent, well built, hard working team. It's not a team that's totally flying by the seat of their pants. They're organized. They're trying to build from the back. There's real quality. There's a nice thrust from midfield, particularly with McAneffin. You've got the goal scorer with Hubin. And yeah, look, they miss out on the Irish Cup. They then, you know, aren't able to win the League Cup, where I thought they were the better team. They have two big opportunities. First, both at home as well. First against Coleraine, where Coleraine go down to 10 men for the whole second half. They even have a penalty where Patrick Hubin misses. And on Saturday, they were the far better team. Linfield down to what some people would say is the bare bones. And they came at them, and they came at them, and they came at them. And yeah, there's a good save over here, nice defensive block over there. But when it all adds up, they've fluffed their lines. They've let themselves down. And I think the feeling from a lot of people that I've talked to is that, look, we're not really going to win the title, but it's nice to be there. But I do think there's going to be a slight flipping of the narrative, and it's not going to be quite dramatic, like, out with the board and everybody that's in there. But there's like a real frustration of that we had an opportunity here, and they did. Opportunities in individual games against Larne in particular, and I know they'll go back and go, this shouldn't have happened, that shouldn't have happened, and refereeing decision here. But the Glentoran thing has been not really a collection of it's not a farce, but there's some sort of tragedy element to it all of what could have been.
Yeah, and I'll compare that, if you like, with the Korean situation, right? Glentoran, I suppose you could look back and the investment, their probably initial investment came, what, 5, 6 years ago now with Ali Poor, and the money and the investment has been rolled out over the period of 5 or 6 years. Contrast that, I suppose, with Korean, who went full time last year, and this is their second year. The investment, I suppose, really came in the summer with Henry Ross taking more or less full control of the club. It's interesting what you say about the sort of the Glentoran fans saying, "Oh, it's nice to be in the title race," and I don't know if they're being totally honest with themselves when they might say that, because I would have thought at this stage with the investment and the years of building a squad that they would have thought that they should have probably annexed a title by this stage. And I'll swing that back towards Coleraine, and I think genuinely, I know people. There's been outside noise, people saying that there's been investment in Coleraine, and people from other clubs saying, "Oh, Coleraine should win the league this year," etc., etc. But it just doesn't happen like that. Um, and I think genuinely, the feeling among Coleraine rank and file Coleraine supporters, the immediate target this year was European football. How that was achieved, be that through the league, be that through a cup or the playoffs at the end of the season, I think it was immaterial. I think the general common consensus was European football in the summer for Coleraine would be a tangible reward at this stage of the investment, and if you like to call it a project. So for Glentoran, I think it's slightly different. They may have expected to win at least one title in 5 or 6 years. Coleraine, I think they're probably still building a squad. You've seen Rory Higgins shaping the squad since he moved in the summer. He brought players in last summer. He moved again in January. So he's still shaping his squad the way that he wants it. Obviously, he had players there before which he's utilised. But like any manager, like Declan Devine, Gary Havern, whoever it is, want their own players, they want to put their own stamp. And Rory Higgins, he's still doing that. So I think for Korean fans, the situation is quite simple. It's European football this year, and if they get that, I think genuinely 99% of Korean fans would be more than happy.
Because you would be actually probably in a good position to go into those European games as much as you could get a absolute sickener of a draw. Like you'll feel as though you'll go in with the full time setup well underneath your belts. It's a team that I always feel looks sharp and fit. Maybe just are totally knitting together. Haven't found a system that does everything that Larne is able to do. And maybe you're just finding the personnel at that point, just tweaking it here or there. Teams are now setting themselves up far differently against Coleraine than they had done in the multiple sixth place finishes. You talk about Glentoran as if it's the overall, as you said, 5, 6, whatever year project. I think a lot of people are signaling or honing in on this season as a one-off team because there have been significant rotation. Let's say maybe 2 years ago, Sule, Burns, all these other players kind of moving on, the Donnellys, and I think last year what can be looked back upon as a bit of a transition. You obviously bring in Hubin, and you get some nice players coming in. Amos and Cooney, I think, are just really solid in those wing back positions for them. And it's little players that maybe go under the radar. The Ross Clarks, I know Jonathan Warwick wasn't playing, but they come in. Like Jordan Stewart, I think, could have ended up at almost any team within this league, within the top flight, and you would have went, that probably makes sense. And I don't know if anybody at the start of the season was ever going to bet that he was going to be playing at the level he has this season. And I think the regret is going to come in now because there was not an open goal, but there was an absolute title race. You look at those 6 points and you go, add 2 points on Saturday, add 2 points from that Larne game where they feel as though it shouldn't have went awry. You take then, a point away from Larne, and they're there. But in the same way that I would have criticised Linfield teams in other years, you see it just even recently. It's those games against the other top teams. They just haven't done enough. I think they've played well enough, but they just haven't had either the bounce of the ball, the refereeing decision, whatever way it is. And you talk about Hubin. I think Hubin gives you so much, and he's given you so many goals, and he has that physicality, and he's not the same, whatever it may be, 26, 27-year-old Hubin. And I think when you play him you get a certain type of player, which has its positives and its negatives. And it's like you add that cog in, you have to kind of work around it. And I think there was times on Saturday where I thought just that extra wee bit of commitment or anticipation or just a wee zip more yard of pace would have got a goal or two more. But the reason why he's playing in the Irish League is because he's the age that he's at. And I think the regret may be, is Jordan Stewart next year going to repeat the season he's done this year? Is Hooban going to be in the same type of nick? You add another year on to Kane, on to Clark. Are they still going to keep Cooney and Amos? I think Kamsa Kamara is a bit of a pipe dream for him sticking around. Add another year on to McAneff. Cammy Palmer, is he going to be a tough player to either sign, or are you going to get this brilliant spurt of health from him? I think you look at this, and it's not lightning in a bottle, but a lot of things have come together really nicely for Glentoran to be this somewhat coherent top team, but they've still tripped on their own laces at times.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, what you're saying there, you're almost hinting at another summer of transition there, like listing those players that perhaps can't replicate what they've done this year. But let's not forget, I mean, there's only 6 points of a difference between Larne and Glentoran. You're only talking a swing, a game here, a game there. Larne's next league game is against Coleraine. If Coleraine would happen to go and beat Larne, for example, Inver, and maybe the Glens win on the same night, suddenly we're talking. We're having a different argument here, Peter. I think
goal difference is 7. Just to make people aware, it is 7.
Yeah, that's a big factor. I get what you're saying, but I wouldn't discount Glentoran out the title race, and to that extent, Coleraine too, because I was talking to players after the game on Saturday, and they were all saying, there's a lot of, like, when it comes to the split and the top 6 teams are playing one another, there's going to be lots of twists and turns. And I was looking back there, like last year, and there was very few teams in their post-split fixtures that were able to go on any kind of a winning run. In fact, Cliftonville were the only team, and they were in 7th. They went into the split last year in 7th, and they won 4 and lost 1 of their 5, which was mightily impressive. In fact, they won the playoff against Coleraine at the end of that. But the rest of the teams, there were like lots of wins and losses and draws. So if any team can put together a manageable or any kind of a run of wins, all of a sudden things could change very quickly. And what you also have to remember, Peter, and it was something that Coleraine head coach Rory Higgins has said to me a number of weeks ago. This league this year is much more competitive than it has been even last year. Like last year, after 33 games, as we were going into the split, Linfield were obviously well clear in 76. Second place Larne going into the split last year had 54 points. This year they've got 73. That's like 21 points better off they are this year. Coleraine are 16 points better off. Glens are 15 points better off. That gives you an idea that it's ultra competitive. By the same token, Linfield, they're 14 points worse off. But what Rory was probably trying to suggest was that it's difficult to win games in this league, and it's difficult to go and win that league because there are so many good teams taking points off each other. So I wouldn't rule Glentoran out. There's only 6 points there. You and I, Peter, we've both been in the game a long time. Football's a funny old game. And until it's mathematically done, I wouldn't be ruling the top 3 teams out.
Well, I mean, the Coleraine thing would be totally remarkable. You're right there. Glens, they've got their fingers crossed that Colerane's going to do both themselves, Coleraine, and Glentoran a favour by beating Larne. Obviously, it's in their wheelhouse, and then Glentoran are going to have to do their own job and win. But they could have finished their own dinner in the sense that it only being 4 points. in a sense, 4 and 6 is similar enough in reality, just because of the goal difference. I know it's not exactly, but it's only a slight change for them. We just have yet to see Larne lose in the same kind of manner that they're going to need in the last couple of games here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, if, for most people here, they'll be looking back at the highlights, and I'll tell you, the Ross Clark miss was as shocking in that how did he not just put that anywhere else, as it was live, as it was in the highlights. Look, they just kept banging the door, and this was a Linfield team with not a huge amount to play for, bar pride, down to bare bones. I think if you look at this side, I think it shows you maybe where Linfield are and where Glentoran are. Outside of Matthew Fitzpatrick, there's not many players that I think Glens fans or an outsider like me would go, oh, I would take them over a Glens player in the head-to-head. I'll tell you what, maybe just dealing with health, Jordan Stewart came on at half-time, really, totally revitalised the Glens, but it was just too little too late. And, I wouldn't even say Linfield defended particularly brilliantly. They just stood firm, and Glens trying these deep balls into the box, weren't able to get too much going on the ground. Again, I just think it's another, to really focus on this game being the epitome of everything, I think it's wrong. I think it's just another example of missed opportunities. And, we said there for Linfield, they're done and dusted for the league title. That's what they're fighting for, is trying to get in the third, 5 points away. It looks as much of a mountain for them as Glentoran going against Larne. Of course, Linfield beat Coleraine in their one-on-one, and everything could change. But if we're looking now at Linfield in fourth, and the only way for them is to go through a playoff, they're not quaking in their boots. Looking at Cliftonville, Dungannon, Carrick, of course, Coleraine may be in there based on how the Irish Cup goes, but it's not nailed on for them. They've still got plenty of football to play here.
There's so, do you know what, Mark Coyle, speaking to him after the game, Coleraine Dungannon on Saturday, he happened to score the winner. He obviously led Shelburne to the title down south a couple of years ago. And I was talking to him, and this is obviously he joined Coleraine in January, and he's not really played in a top six split scenario before. This is his first taste of it. And I did ask him about that. And he's very excited because he says that you've got the top six teams all playing one another. Anything can happen. And he's right. I am only, we were talking there a minute ago, say Coleraine and Larne playing Tuesday. Right. Picture the scenario, Peter. Coleraine beat Larne on the same night. Glentoran are away to Cliftonville. Right. So depending on the Irish Cup this weekend, which we'll talk about later, but Glentoran go to Cliftonville. So say Cliftonville get through to an Irish Cup final, and they have that on the horizon. So Glentoran go to Solitude on Tuesday. So Glentoran maybe beat Cliftonville. Say Coleraine beat Larne. All of a sudden, there's 3 points between Larne and Glentoran. Will we be having the same conversation, or will we start to say, maybe?
You see, if you, for example, were to beat Larne, whatever it is, 2-0, it's the goal difference, right? So you squeeze that down to 2. You then, Glentoran, give them a 2-0 win. That swaps that 7 points down, 7 goal difference down to 3. You then, of course, give Glentoran a 2-0 win against Larne. It's goal difference. It's all of a sudden it's a shootout. The last 2 games, I'm thinking that's, and they're kind of hoping for Linfield in the midfield. That's the real entertainment. I know I started this podcast talking about a moment of silence. It could all swap, or by the time listening to this, it's done and dusted.
See, you mentioned goal difference there. That could come into play.
Oh yeah, at both ends of the league.
Really, really could. Yeah, I mean, Rory Higgins told me a couple of weeks ago, we were talking, and he goes, he's lost the league on goal difference in his past. So, even at that stage, that was months ago, and we were talking, and he goes, I'd lost a league on goal difference. And then when you say that, and you talk about the wins, possible scenarios, the goal swings, it could come down, it's been a tight league, and it could come down in the end to something like goal difference. Larne's goal difference is 40, Glentoran's is 33, and Colerane's is 32. You say a goal or two here, there, a point or two, and all of a sudden, but you know what? Despite all the conversations we have, the people that are the happiest are bound to be Niffle because they must be sitting rubbing their hands because you've got three, potentially four teams challenging to win the title, and everywhere else there's competitive games with something riding on it, whether it's for the European playoffs or at the bottom end, the relegation playoff. So if anybody's happy in this scenario, it'd be Jared Lawler and the gang up at Niffle.
Yeah, like watching a game. Now it was kind of weird because it was windy, it was rainy, it was hot. That's an example of maybe what could be football not being played in the absolute dirge of winter months. But look, we'll go to the other side of all this, and that is, of course, I mean, we're still keeping Coleraine in there from a technical point of view, and to keep yourselves in it, you had to keep winning, and the team you had to take down was a team. I think one of your more higher profile slip ups this year, and that was that was on the carpet of Stangmore Park. And there was a feeling that it could be going that way once again when Dungannon took the lead. But, I think this is a slightly depleted Swift side that we're currently seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, Coleraine go through the gears, inspired by who else but Joel Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, it was 4 weeks to the day practically that Korean last visited Stangmore Park and found themselves 3-0 down after half an hour and were completely dismantled by Rodney McAree's team on that particular afternoon. As you say, Dungannon Swifts at the moment are sort of nursing a number of players back from injuries. They're missing a few good players, particularly in the offensive part of the field as well. And ironically, both managers said afterwards that Coleraine started Saturday's game very, very well, very bright, and then promptly got hit on the counter attack after 2 minutes. And at that stage, I think anybody of a Korean persuasion was thinking, "Oh, not again! Here we go." But as you say, come with the hour, come with Joel Cooper, a trademark finish from him, left foot finish from sort of just inside the penalty area for I think it was his 18th league goal of the season, and then Korean scored 5 minutes into the second half. Mark Coyle with his first goal since joining the club in
That's a
January.
decent thwack, that one.
It was a good finish. We didn't know that he had that in his logger. To be fair, it hasn't shown it. That was his first. But after that, Korean passed up a number of really, really good opportunities to increase their lead. And I suppose the man that was most guilty of that was Joel Cooper. I mean, he missed a couple of goals that if you were a betting man, you would have put your house on him scoring. It was one occasion he was running through 1-on-1 with the keeper, and we all waiting for the net to bulge, and inexplicably the ball went past the post. And I don't think anybody was more surprised than him, to be quite honest, because given the form that he's been in this year, he was kind of like, how did I miss that? But listen, you take the points. It was a job done. Yes, Dungannon were depleted. Yes, Rodney's got one eye firmly on the Irish Cup semi-final that's coming up. Nevertheless, it's been a problem ground for Coleraine in the past. I think that was their first win there in about 3 years. So, all that said, listen, professional job. You mentioned maybe Glenn's not getting the job done. Coleraine, the opposite, got the job done. At times, maybe it wasn't overly pretty, but 3 points in the bag, back up the road. Peter, it's a good job, good day all round.
I'm sure the feeling from everybody up there in the showgrounds has been, this is a bit nice not just to be kind of making up the numbers in the top half, disappointed of what could have been with the strikers that score the goals, but unfortunately we're letting in so many at the back. As much as many people, including me, were hyping up and thinking that, there's so much talent here, if it all clicks together, Coleraine could be and should be right up there till the very last day for winning the title. It hasn't gone that way just yet. Obviously could change, miraculous, whatever it may be, could come. But has it not just been a kind of a feel-good season overall for fans of the Bandsiders?
I think it has taken in the round. I suppose nobody really knew what to expect. The new manager coming in the summer, a number of new faces coming in, a change of playing style, I suppose, that players have to get used to. Players have to get used to playing with one another too. You've got you talk about letting in goals. I mean, you've got maybe a keeper playing with different defenders every week because of injury. Players are getting to know each other. That all takes time. So in the round, I think Korean fans, yeah, we're sitting third after 34 games. They're 19 points better off than they were at this time last year, Peter. So on the, by that very metric, if you're 19 points better off in the same place as you were last year, I think you're doing something right.
What also this proves, I think, from people outside the league or particularly people within it, I'm sure I'm sure Coleraine were well compensating the players that were coming their way, but in the same way with Larne, just before they won the title, where they're in Europe, they're up around the top end of the league. This season has proven stability. It's proven proof of concept. You have a mix of veteran heads and Cooper and Glacken and Shevlin, all this type of stuff. But then you're getting in people from England as well as younger up and coming Irish League talent, quite like Ben Wiley. So the next time the big starlet is coming up and you might not be shopping in the same pool within the Irish League, you're always a draw. But you've now really established that this is not a flash in the pan. Could be. We'll have to see how next season go. But there's a certain, I think, essence of stability, which I think will be more attractive going forward at Coleraine. Because beforehand, you were hype and many people were feeling doubt.
You know, a lot of the hype that you're referring to, Peter, wasn't really coming from within Coleraine, to be fair. It was coming from outside and outside noises. I'm not just saying that was you, Peter. You didn't do that, of
Sorry,
course.
you did sign the best player in the
y-
league to a very extensive deal. So come on, there was always going to be hype around
right.
Coleraine.
Yeah, of course there's hype, and that's to be expected. But I think, right. So say you say, right. So Joel Cooper, best player in the league, comes, right. Obviously, he's got himself a good deal. That's the way business, and that's the way anybody works in
And
employment.
fair
You
play
go,
to
you
him.
get a
Yep.
good deal. Right. All I would say to you is Joel Cooper could have came to Korean, put his feet up, said, I'm at a nice wee salary here. I'll just go through the motions. He scored 21 goals, 18 in the league. I think 21 goals is maybe his best ever return in the Irish League. He consistently drags the team into games. He, if you speak to Rory Higgins doesn't really so much speak about Joel Cooper's goals as about his attitude and his willingness to work and what he brings to the team in terms of leadership and work ethic and everything else. So it's okay. Everybody goes, yeah, you're buying the best player, but what you're also probably buying is that work ethic, attitude, and experience. Those are the vital commodities that if you want to win, say, league titles or trophies, that's what you're buying. That's what you're spending the money on. You're not buying a show pony that just we can buy the best player in the league and we're just going to stick him in a Galacticos or anything. You're buying somebody who's been there and done it, knows what it takes, and is prepared and willing to do it. And I get it. There's hype and all the rest, but I think if if you were being honest and people were being honest, the Korean have been pretty within the camp, as aware. They haven't gone about shouting and blowing about themselves from the rooftops. They've just quietly tried to go about their business. So yeah,
You've just inspired something, and I hope this continues. In the next few years, if there's many titles coming your way, are you going to be known as the Galacticos?
now
The
what?
Galacticos.
Tacticals,
The
right?
Galacticos. Trademark it right
I think you've
now.
hit on something there.
There we go. Led in
There now.
by Cooper and others.
Have I got the copyright on that, or is that your
That's my
copyright?
copyright. Thank you very much. You're the inspiration.
We'll have to.
What I guess I'm trying to suggest is that last year, if a Lee bonus type player appeared where everybody wants to sign them. They have ambition. You might even say Paul McGovern, but I
Yeah.
think he's ready to go beyond the Irish League. But let's say we're talking about Paul McGovern and he says, I
Hmm.
want one more year in the Irish League. I want to win a title here, develop, but I also want the idea that I'm going to go beyond the Irish League eventually.
Mm.
I don't know if a player like that last year would have viewed Coleraine as the type of place to go to do that. I think this year you are.
Hmm.
Larne come in, Coleraine come in,
Hmm.
Glentoran, Linfield. Coleraine are there. They're not they're kind of, if they're all A tier, you're A1. I think you're
Yeah.
A tier now. And you've obviously got the work to be there. That comes with coaching, financial packages, and all that type of stuff. But I think you're really now established as you're a top team and you can
Yeah.
progress within this club.
I I would definitely not disagree with that. When you, as a club, are able to go and sign the best player in the league from a club like Linfield, that's a statement. You know, there's no way of other way of looking at that. Then you add to that in January, they go and bring in Mark Coyle, the captain of Shelburne, who led them to the league title in 2024, I think it was, captained them in Europe. You're able to entice him to Korean. That backs up everything that you've just said, Peter, that now Korean are able to present themselves as a club that's moving forward, that's heavily ambitious, that have ambitions to try to win trophies domestically, probably to try and compete to a level in European football as well. So that's an attractive proposition. 100% backs up what you're saying. And then young players, you've mentioned the likes of Paul McGovern or whoever else, may look at the likes of a Joe Cooper going or Mark Coyle going or Mark Connolly, the former captain, I think, Derry City, that are now going to Korean. If you're a young player, you're thinking, yeah, I would like a bit of that because that's a club that's going in the right direction. The players that they're signing are top quality. As a player, a young player, I'm going to learn from them, and they could maybe use that as a vehicle to then maybe move across the water or to further ambitions, in another league as well. So yeah, I 100% agree with you, and Korean are in that position now. And ultimately, if they win a trophy this year, or if they make European football, that only enhances what we're saying.
We saw Larne get the money and then have to build, earn that success, and then be able to earn that feeling within football circles that they're a club of stability. Look, we still need to see if Coleraine can establish that in the long run. But I'm sure, and we'll get to this game in a bit. But you've had a few battles back and forward, Coleraine against Larne. I think this Saturday could be maybe the start of a new era of a rivalry there, particularly if you two are going to be in near the top for the long haul. Um, and it's just interesting to see the league change. There'll be plenty of fans saying, boo hiss, investment. It's not the way they would like to see it happen within the Irish League. Quote unquote buying leagues, whatever whatever way you want to say it. Right? I'm not saying that, but I do think we're gonna have a league champion from Coleraine, Glentoran, or Larne, and you're both in the mix here for the Irish Cup. And I wonder, like, clearly Coleraine want to go in and do their best in the Irish Cup, of course, to do another trophy and get in Europe as well. But I think there's just an extra bit of spice going into this game on Saturday. Do you feel that at all? Do you think both teams are being coy?
I wouldn't say they're being coy. I don't think coyness will come into it. I think Saturday is going to be a right battle because there's an Irish Cup final on the line at the end of the day. I don't think you can go into that game on Saturday holding back or being coy or keeping something up your sleeve.
Which is often what we see in these top six, top
I
four encounters where it's
I
almost
can't
like,
see
you know
that.
what I mean? You usually see these games where it's like try and not lose and try and sneak a win.
Well,
It's completely flipped when
yeah.
it's the semi final. You're right.
Well, no, I get that aspect of it too because both teams won't want to lose. Yeah, so there will be an element that the teams will probably set up similarly that they'll not want to give away anything too early because first goals in every game is so important. But what I would say, there'd be nothing. points, so far as that both teams will do everything possible to get to an Irish Cup final. It's just not another game. There's Irish Cup final at stake. Best day out in the Irish League by a country mile. Players, managers, supporters, everybody will tell you that. It's the best day of the year. It's one that supporters absolutely love. So neither team are going to leave anything on the pitch at Windsor on Saturday. And I guess the other side of it, Peter, is it's like, so say whoever comes out on Saturday, the teams meet again on
Yeah.
Tuesday. So, it's one of those little sort of vagaries that we get in football and sport. So it's like, it's almost similar to the Arsenal Man City League Cup final there recently. There was a lot of talk about the two teams, 1 and 2 in the English Premier League, meeting in the cup final. And there was a lot of chat among pundits about what impact, if any, it would have if Arsenal win. Would it send out a statement? If City win, would that start to derail Arsenal's potential title challenge? And you could argue that something similar could be the case this Saturday. It's like whoever wins this Saturday will begin into Tuesday's league encounter buoyant, full of momentum, positivity. By contrast, whoever loses on Saturday is going into next Tuesday's league game feeling a little bit sorry for themselves, perhaps. Management have to pick the players up, go again for a big league game. So you throw that into the mix, Peter, as well as an Irish Cup final at stake. I think it's just going to be an absolute cracker on Saturday.
Yeah, look, I'm sure people who follow the Invermen are feeling like, why is there not enough talk and discussion around us when they are just on the cusp of doing 3 in the last 4? I think they've seen so much success over the past number of years. Last year fell away after their European run, losing Lynch. They built themselves back up again. But we're also looking at a team. They went on Saturday. It was important. It seemed to be scruffy at times. Late on, they needed to get that second goal to really put a cap on it. Great goal, great team goal early on from Lusty. Cliftonville just keep on going, maybe save themselves a wee bit for the semi-final coming up. But in turn, that's a team that's looking to work and looking to develop. But they look slightly unflappable. We'll see how we're talking after 2 rounds of 90 minutes with Coleraine. But, I think if they are the team, and they, as we said, are the most likely team to win the title, they haven't won it by a fluke.
Yeah, they are so strong. And it's an interesting point that you made that, you said about people not talking about Larne. And to be fair, I think that is exactly the way Larne and their manager, Gary Havern, want it. Nobody really talked about them all year in the league. It was from the start, it was about big spending Coleraine. That was the major story at the start. And then you had Linfield, the chat about Linfield defending their title. And then you have obviously all the chat around Glentoran and what they were doing and could they mount a challenge. Meanwhile, all the time, quietly in the background, Larne were just racking up the points, racking up the wins. Not always very spectacular, but that doesn't win you leagues. 1-0 wins win you leagues. Good defence wins you leagues. Nobody talked about them. They just quietly went about their business. And then all of a sudden, when people started taking notice of them, there they were at the top of the league with a handsome advantage to their rivals. And Larne were just sitting back going, yeah, just you keep talking about the other teams and we'll just keep racking up the points. And that's exactly how they want it. Now, it'll be interesting to see a bit of focus this Saturday come the Irish Cup. And then the focus will probably ratchet up in the last 4 league games of the season. But like you said the word there, unflappable. And they've shown thus far that they're like a machine, Peter. To me, they just look like a machine. They know what they're doing. They know how to get it. They know how to score goals, keep clean sheets. They know how to pick up points. And crucially, they have a couple of league titles under their belt in recent years, so that they won't panic. They won't panic. They've been there. They know it's like Cheltenham, course and distance winners. Cheltenham win back every year, so they know how to do it.
We're all transfixed around how this league title will end up. And I think we follow sport, we follow the Irish League for the drama, for the intrigue, for the ups and the downs and the twists in the tail, and sometimes the irony. I think any other week, this result would maybe lead the podcast. We know what's happening at the top end. We only had one game in Section B, or the bottom half of the top flight. And my goodness, was it an impactful one, filled with all those things I was talking about there. It's been an amazing 2026 for Carrick Rangers, helmed by Stephen Baxter. And just as that first game in this split, where it's his former employers, a legend of that club, come into town, desperate for points. Carrick themselves keen not to take their foot off the pedal as they look to build momentum. Lock down seventh, make sure there's no doubt at all, and it's just a crushing defeat for Declan Cattell and his Crusaders team. I mean, I think their draw last week was a slight glimmer of hope of, well, we take that one little step. They've got 1 point on Glenavon. We'll see how it goes. We've said a few times in the past few weeks about this Crusaders team that they look like a team that is sinking. They took on some water on Saturday. This is feeling like a very slow and torturous decline for the North Belfast team.
It really does, and as you said, the ultimate irony is like Stephen Baxter. I mean, a penny for his thoughts at sort of 5 o'clock on Saturday after that game.
Led
I mean, I
by
think that,
what looks like a resurgent, and we've seen it for months, Paul Heatley. Bonkers.
I know. Listen, I think I read a quote. I didn't read the whole thing, but a quote from Stephen Baxter in the wake of Saturday's game, and it was more or less along the lines. It's breaking his heart seeing what's happening to Crusaders. He spent like so long there as a player and as a manager, and he had so much success, and he led them to so much success, and then for him to go and hit them for 6-1 on Saturday, it's more a tennis score than a football score, to be honest with you. But I mean, how he must have felt on Saturday, mixed emotions, doesn't even come into it. But listen, he's employed by Carrick Rangers now. That's business. That's the way of the world. He'll always retain that soft spot for Crusaders. It'll always be in his heart. But his allegiance now is to Carrick Rangers. They pay his salary. He's got his own targets. You say they're sitting in seventh. Cliftonville finished seventh last year, won the playoffs, got to Europe. Who's to say that Carrick couldn't do the same?
Linfield, I think, should be terrified. Dungannon and Cliftonville as well, but Linfield feel like the team that's got so much to lose here. I know they've already lost them in recent times, and it won't be if those two teams were to meet at Taylor's Avenue. We know that, but just the way they've been in the past few months, Heatley, Gibson, Lecky when he's fit, they're scary for every team in this league.
Nobody would want to play.
Look, they're physical, they're
play
speedy, they're plucky, they're dogged.
Oh, that's the one team that you just do not want to play.
Yeah, and some people
they are.
Some people will wonder, like, when, and you can always look back, of course. When did this Cruise decline really sink in? You can look at this year and go, shouldn't have signed that player. They've relied too much on younger players, unproven in the league, and we talk about narratives. I think it's been proven in the past few years anyway, as we've seen an influx of players you wouldn't have seen, or at least their destination to the Irish League, you wouldn't have seen them in previous years. But Carrick are a walking, talking example of how experience in this league, it can just be so important.
And that's, you flip that, Peter, and you look at the Crusaders side, lacks that experience, that doggedness, that know-how, that, for want of a better word, that little bit of nastiness, that cuteness, streetwiseness, whatever you want to call it. Just Crusaders is just too easy to play against, and once teams caught onto that, then they'll exploit that for all it's worth. Even if even if Crusaders went in front against you, you would know that if you had a chance against them again still, and if you scored against them more times than enough this year, the heads go down because ultimately they're probably lacking leaders on the pitch. They don't have the leadership that the Carrick Rangers that you just mentioned. Your Paul Heatley's, your Adam Leckie's, you could go through the team and rattle off 7 or 8 Billy Joe Burns players with experience that know how that have done it. Crusaders, on the other hand, haven't got that, and it all probably goes back to Peter that Crusaders team that we all have witnessed winning so many trophies and titles over the so many years. They were all coming to their prime, and they all came to the same age at the same time, and uh, they all then started finishing up at the same time, and it's very, very difficult then to try. It's probably a bit like the prime Manchester United team when Fergie was there, and then when they all sort of at the same sort of time in their careers, then you had to try and rebuild, and it's very, very, very difficult. United found that. Crusaders obviously found it when you lose the likes of Jordan Owens, Colin Coates, even Declan Cattell himself, lots of others. It's just not as simple just getting those players again, is it?
But even at that, the Irish League has changed. It's changed in the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Forget the last time the Crews were champions, and they were able to build a team because they were one of the bigger and better teams. They seeked out talent. Let's be fair, from the Gavin Whites, the Shirt Dallases, and even Paul Heatley, they got so many of those calls right, so that when a Billy Joe Burns wants to come their way, they're putting them in amongst other great players, Lehman and all that type of stuff. He just helped added just that wee bit more to who they were. And with that change in the Irish League means that how a team like Crusaders, who doesn't have the fan base or the revenue that a Glentoran or so does, and like I said, other teams are struggling with this. I guess less so Ballymena, but they had done before, Portadown, even Bangor, whoever made Glenavon in the same way. If they can't pay the wages to get those players, they have to be more cute. And they've always had to be cute to sign well. And now this is maybe an example of when you have to make more of those bets than you would like to have. And when they all are bust, or they all don't give you the returns, it can all flip. Ballymena flirted with relegation a couple of years ago. Portadown have been up and down. Look at what Glenavon's been through. And here's Crews looking, well, it's between them and Glenavon, realistically, for that bottom spot. And if they go down, how will they come back? And if they do come back, which I'm sure is very likely, at some point, might not be straight away, but will they ever be that same side? In the next 10 years, will we see a return of the quote-unquote top six, Larne, Glentoran, Blues, Coleraine, Cliftonville, and Crews? I don't think so. I think they're a mid-table club now, and that's if they can build themselves back up again.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Peter, that the landscape of the league has changed dramatically, excuse me, in the last 5 or 6 years. Um, I think back, say, for example, we talked about Coleraine in the Irish Cup. The last time they won the Irish Cup in 2018, you go through that Coleraine team and it backs up a lot of what you were saying. When you look at that team, you had Owen Bradley, who was plucked from junior football, leading the line, scoring the goal in the cup final. You had local lads like Adam Mullan, you had Brad Lyons, you had wee Jamie McGonigal, who came through the reserves at Dungiven. Gareth McConaughey came through the Korean District League. James McLaughlin came through that was in 2018. The landscape now is completely different, and I don't know if those players are getting the same opportunities when clubs can go across to Scotland or England or down south and bring in players as well. And you mentioned Crusaders. Like at this moment in time, as you rightly say, it's between Crusaders and Glenavon. So you say, if, for example, Crusaders go down, well, one thing we could probably both agree on is that Fraser Bryden won't be there next year to help them because he's already been coveted by the leading clubs in the Irish League. So they're probably going to lose a 20-goal striker straight off, depending. Even if they stay in the league, they're probably going to lose in the summer,
Yeah.
depending who comes up with the money for them, I guess. So immediately you're down a 20-goal season striker. So where do you get another one of them? Particularly if you're in the lower reaches of the Premier League or worst case scenario in the Championship. So you're really going to have to use your scouting system and try to pluck little gems like Igor Rakowski doing a good job at Ballymena United. They took him from Armagh City. You have Brian Healy, Cliftonville taking to the
But
top
but he,
league quite well, I think, as
but
well.
even that, where in 10 years ago, it would have been a come on here, we'll see how it goes, and you're an investment, and you're not paying the same as the top end striker in the league, right? Even those players, by all accounts, aren't chump change themselves and probably come with the same amount of
No,
risk because for every we signed Joe Gormley, Lee Bonus, whoever it may be, even Benji McGee when he was up at Loughgall when he dropped down to PSNI or whatever. For every one of those, you're like, just buy the best players in the first division and it's easy. There's going to be
mm,
players that just aren't able to step up, and I don't want to name names, that aren't able to step up in the same way. So they're still going to have to commit to that. Look, they're just going to have to figure it out because you might even go, they shouldn't have got all these Scottish players, youth players in. Well, they weren't saying that when Offered was banging them in last year. And if they were signed to be a Crusaders player, could have significantly helped their coffers. So they're just trying to play in the current Irish League market, and they've just got it wrong. But as has been talked about in this podcast, the real concern for the Crews is how on earth they build up that spine again. Because if the players that are currently there aren't it's not as easy to go, give me some 28-year-old who's going to fight all the time, be healthy, and isn't going to absolutely break the bank, and we'll stick them in centre midfield and they'll play 35 games. They're hard to get. So it takes a while for these clubs to season that spine, isn't it? And Glenavon have probably felt that a bit themselves this season. Didn't play this weekend, of course, but they themselves have suffered from massive turnarounds in players.
yeah, they've had a torrid season, I suppose, with players in and out, and a bit of a sort of changing faces down there. Like any club, Peter, you're looking just at a bit of stability and try to have a core group, and then if you can sort of add to that and everything else. But you know what? See now, the Irish League it's not any different really than any other league, whether it be over in England or in Scotland or whatever. It's going the same way. It's the teams that kind of have the greater sort of spending power or the greatest investment that sort of is able to get the better players. In turn, that tends to sort of get you the trophies. It's the same across the water. It's the same in Scotland. Now it's the same in the Irish League. There's a part of you that goes, that's the world, the society, the world that we're living in. That's just the realities of it. And you'd said earlier, about maybe potentially the league, somebody winning it like a Larne or maybe a Coleraine, and maybe people poo-pooing the idea that maybe because of investment or whatever. But that's the world. That's the realities. It's the same in England. Man City are winning the league, or Arsenal's winning the league, or whoever it is that's spending the money. And people from here support those teams, and there's no problem when their teams are doing it and winning trophies, etc. And would it not be refreshing if a Larne won the league, or say a Coleraine, for example, maybe not this year, but going down the line? Let's face it, Coleraine have won the league once in 100 years of their existence. Their 100 years, 2027, my reckoning, next year. Nice time to win a second one. But listen, they've won the league once in almost 100 years. Would it not be nice to see a club like that winning it, given a little bit of something new to the league, or for other fans of other clubs to go, well, if we had a bit of investment, that could be us. That could be us, and is that not what sport's about? Take away the money
Yeah.
aspect of it for a minute, but just seeing other people winning it.
Well, and we don't know the realities of how Crusaders have slid to where they are. But do you think the way they are now looking and the way their future seems to be in front of them, would it scare other fan bases into, you know, are we being ran the right way? Are we spending wages that we can afford? Is it going to impact the teams in the future? I'm genuinely not trying to, point towards the Coleraine director because we know where that funding is coming from. But I mean, are they a case of this could be any team in the future, no matter how big you are? Because I think people would have been surprised only a couple of years ago to be talking about Crusaders lacking Irish League experience, lacking talent, and potentially falling towards the cliff edge of top flight football.
Listen, Crusaders, they're not the first club that's happened to, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
I've sort of attachments to Korean through my work and stuff, and when I first probably started reporting, I remember Korean getting relegated and competing in the first division, etc., etc. It can happen to any club, and and I don't like keep referring to England, right? But
you're right. No one has a divine right to
right.
be in
Well,
the top flight.
we're sitting here,
You're
right,
right.
and I have a team I support in the English Premier League, right? We look at Spurs. Spurs are in danger of getting relegated from the English Premier League into the Championship, which you're sitting talking about Crusaders and how much of a shock that would be, etc. How much of a shock would it be for Spurs, one of the sort of self-proclaimed big six, if you like, in England, maybe spending a year in the Championship? It can happen to anybody. It's I suppose for most clubs, it's a result of a number of factors. Maybe not good enough players is an obvious one. Maybe management on the pitch, off the pitch, finances, funding, whatever. It's an amalgam of things. And once that little bit of a rot sets in, I think it's very, very hard to turn it around. And you could make an argument sometimes that for certain clubs or a club at a time, maybe it would not be the worst thing to be relegated, perhaps. You talk about Crusaders. Where the Crusaders enjoyed probably about a decade there of unparalleled success at Seaview.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that start, Peter? When they were relegated and they came from the Championship?
And Kim Baxter built the club up.
Sometimes you have to take a step forward or step back to go forward. And they were in the Championship. They were down and out. Stephen Baxter came in, pulled them up by the whatever you want to call it, the bootstraps, gradually improved, and then went on win leagues, cups, Satanta Cup. Who's to say it couldn't happen again? Sometimes maybe taking a break from that pressure of the top league where you can drop down, get your house in order, and then rebuild and go again. Who knows? I'm not saying no club wants to get relegated, but sometimes could be a blessing in disguise. Who knows?
I reckon some Cruise fans are saying, why you sound like you're talking about this top flight eulogy already when it ain't confirmed. And you're right. I mean, you could still see a turnaround, as we said. Games to go.
Ah.
It's in your hands. You've got Glenavon. You beat them, regardless of their result coming up. Beat them and win elsewhere. You can still survive. But,
yeah,
I mean, I think you're starting to feel frustration. We talked about temperatures and where clubs are at. I think you're starting to feel the frustration from the fans starting to bubble over. They're frustrated by what they feel is a lack of action, and that, yeah, I mean, Declan Cadell cuts a despondent figure, but they have games to go and they can still fight and still have their top flight status if they can, but they're looking the least likely, I think, out of Glenavon Crusaders at this current stage.
I know. We're not having a go at Crusaders, but the brutal reality is that somebody has to go, and that's sport. That's we all know at the start of the season, somebody has to drop out, and we're not having a go at Crusaders by any stretch of the imagination. But given their current form, like 4 losses and a draw in their last 5, it doesn't bode well unless somehow or another they managed to get a win or two just to turn it around. But somebody's going to go, and it's going to be most likely either Crusaders or Glenavon. At this stage, Crusaders 1 point ahead, haven't played a game more, so there's still a lot to play for, Peter, down there.
Before we look ahead to the Irish Cup semi-finals, as well as some league games, I want to briefly mention the Northern Ireland game against Italy. I know a few of these players have been in the mix for a while. It didn't go Northern Ireland's way, and they're not the first, of course. But Trey Hume, captain Northern Ireland, doing his bit. Fair play. Terry Devlin getting his first start in a massive game. On came Paul Smith. You have a whole lot of other Irish League alumni on the bench. It's really great to see that pipeline be so successful. Many people might say, well, it wasn't that successful, they didn't get through, but it's just not something we have always seen in modern times.
No, and I suppose it underlines the important role the Irish League does play now in producing players of international grade. You mentioned the likes of Trey Hume. Remember him playing for Ballymena and Linfield, and there he is there now. Terry Devlin, Brad Lyons, ex-Coleraine, Patrick Kelly, both on the bench. Couple of
Number 9, Patrick Kelly, I saw.
a couple of years ago, PK was making his debut at 16. He was still at school,
Yes.
and now he's sitting on the bench in Italy in the World Cup playoff. It's like, oh, what's going on? But
Well, they have to come from somewhere.
yeah, absolutely. Credit to Northern Ireland. They did well. The only drawback was, and anybody watching the game, it's just like played well, defended well, competed well. We're always in the game, but just like a David Healy or somebody up front, don't they? They just don't look like they're going to score a goal.
Yeah. Well, you never know. We could see another one of them pop out, the next great hero from an Irish League team, or maybe whatever this
You just never know.
is, or the other youth teams. But
you just never know.
Never know.
They have to start
I'll
somewhere.
tell you one thing.
Yeah.
It ain't going to be me. We do look ahead, though, to this weekend. Both games at Windsor Park. First one on Friday evening is a repeat of the final last year. You've been having a good old look at Dungannon Swifts in recent weeks. I have myself, but not in the most recent of times. I mean, this is a team who clearly have talent. They've got some of it ripped out of them, from January onwards there. They still have a bit of bite, but there's still quite a few names that have been in that trainer's room on the medical table, and maybe they'll be ready on Friday, wrapped up in cotton wool for the game. And then you have on the other side of it, Cliftonville, who themselves have been up and down, but no doubt have a bit of attacking talent when it all clicks in together. I wonder if this is going to be a bit of a ding-dong back-and-forth game when it's played at a neutral place like Windsor.
It's difficult to know. As you said, I've watched Dungannon the last two games. Coincidentally, both defeats, 1-0 at home to Bangor, when they were absolutely awful. And that's Rodney McGree's words, not mine. And Saturday past when they were much improved against Coleraine. A lot of players, what you would term regular first team players, didn't play any of the two games. And obviously Rodney is trying to carefully manage players to have them ready, available, and at their best come Friday night. And I've no doubt that he will, because he's had more than one eye in this game, probably for the last 2-3 weeks. Cliftonville, I haven't seen as much of Cliftonville recently, but any team that has Joe Gormley, Ryan Kern, Ronan Hale, a couple of the young guys, Keelan Hawthorne, Liam McStravick, I've seen them at Portadown, and they were very good in the first half on a terrible pitch that night. Oh God, it's a difficult one, Peter. But what I would say, like, two great coaches. So, as much about what happens on the field of play, both Jim Magilton and Rodney McGaree are both very, very good operators. And I think they'll have their teams both primed, and I think we could be in, like as you say, a ding dong. I think it could be a very, very attractive game to watch on Friday night on the BBC.
It's funny. I think if this is an entertaining game, that's bad news for Dungannon. I think for
Mm,
Rodney, he needs to try and slow this down, take out that unpredictable spark that I think Clifton will have more. The ability for Brian Healy to pick up the ball and go on a run, drive with it. You know, you have players like that. You mentioned the likes of McStravick and others. And I don't know if Heal is going to be back for this due to suspension,
yeah,
but
he was sent off,
I
wasn't he?
think they have. Yeah, I think they have more players like that in their locker. The Hawthorns, as you said, and Sheridan. But with that, if Dungannon can make it feel tighter, slow it down, try and use those pockets of space to maybe outwit that more naive Cliftonville team. Is Alves going to be able to be in from the off? Dylan controlling things, trying to
Mm,
exploit, those wing backs who can go up and down the pitch. Andy Mitchell hasn't really been getting 90 minutes pretty much at all this season. I think Dungannon are going to have to try and nick it, because if this is a ding dong back and forward 90-minute basketball game, that is Clifton will have the players that are going to make the difference in those scenarios more often than Dungannon are. So it's just who can set the tempo, and perhaps it's about who can take advantage of their spells. We could see it go Dungannon, then back to Cliftonville for 10 minutes, and back and forward in that way, where it isn't ding dong, but it's who can capitalise, tighten the screw, and then have to relieve the pressure coming back. I do fancy Cliftonville here.
yeah, and I would have thought a lot of people would agree with you, and I'm sure most people would have tipped Cliftonville to win the final last year when it didn't work out that way. The month ago when Dungannon beat Coleraine 3-1, they were 3-0 at half time, and key to the success that particular afternoon was Rodney had his team with a game plan which worked to perfection. They pressed high up on Coleraine. Coleraine were like defenders, central defenders, were getting possession of the ball in and around sort of the penalty area. And Rodney had his players primed and the high press. And Coleraine, they forced Coleraine into mistake after mistake, coughed up 3 goals, and it worked to an absolute T on that particular occasion. Whether he would deploy the same tactic against Cliftonville, I'm not sure. But that particular
Well,
afternoon,
there's a key difference for me between the game you're talking about and the game that's going to be played on Saturday,
yeah, you
on
probably know
Friday
what you're
night.
going to say. Go ahead.
Size of pitch
Hmm.
and the surface of that pitch. I mean,
And
I've seen.
I would throw into that as well Johnny Addis. Johnny Addis will get the ball, and the first thing he'll do is look up and he will ping it. And he's no better pinger of a ball. They do get the ball forward quite quickly, Cliftonville, for
Yeah,
any time I've watched them.
yeah. I I've seen Dungannon absolutely rip a team apart at Stymore Park, and then I've been reporting on them against Portadown and that awful pitch at
Mm,
Shamrock, and they look like a completely
yeah.
different side. That Windsor
Well,
Park pitch, it is not great.
but Peter, that Windsor Park pitch ain't going to suit any one of those four semi-finalists because each one of
No,
those teams plays on a 4G, 5G, whichever it is, all play night attractive football. And the semi-finals, I haven't been to Windsor recently, but the last time I was there, it wasn't good. The last time I seen it on the television, didn't look good. So them two play on the Friday night, and then less than 24 hours later, you've got the second semi-final. And, you've got four of the best, arguably four of the best footballing teams, and that's where they're going to have to play. It does. Do you think? Do you think the respective managers, when they sort of put that into their mind thinking, do you change the way you play because of the circumstances, or do you try to stick to what you've been doing all season?
I think you have to. I just haven't seen Dungannon being able to translate. That's what I'd say. I just don't see them translating in the same way on the grass pitch. I think they're down in numbers, and even the players that have been getting regular game time? Are they 100% fit? And I think sometimes that youthful burst, I think I'm relying a lot on that Cliftonville side just to maybe jump into the occasion and be a bit more free and just squeeze out more opportunities where, you know, the weakness in Dungannon, I think, is their back line, and it doesn't help in the type of game that they're going up against. Look, they were able to do it last year, but in turn, last year they did have McGovern, and I don't know if they have the same type of player. Albeit, you know, I've sneakily thought he hasn't been playing every game. Kobe Moore, there's something there. There's not nothing. Has a bit of presence, has a bit of ability to kind of run the channels as well. So he could take an opportunity. But again, you're just going for who has the cutting edge more. But we've talked about it. Dungannon could squeeze and choke out Cliftonville, but I think they'll just have that cutting edge and they'll sneak it 2-1. You then look at a game we've already talked about, Coleraine, Larne. It's a pitch where Larne have regularly obviously been playing big time games at Windsor Park, but I've never seen them stretch and you know, really show off their muscles. And I think for Coleraine, you have Cooper who knows how to work that pitch. I just think Coleraine have had a better recent track record at Windsor Park. And if perhaps they don't lose their way and get distracted by the occasion, I think Coleraine can exploit that space a lot better. I think Larne are a far more better physical side, but on a pitch like that, now you may be bold if you play both these players or all three, but surely Windsor is made for players like Glacken, Cooper, and Ben Wiley to just find those pockets of space.
Yeah, 100%. Wouldn't disagree. My concern again is just what we just talked about a minute ago was the state of the pitch, and I mean it's not for me to say, but like you're sort of two showpiece semi-finals, and we're sitting here talking about what probably is going to be the state of the pitch. I mean, I guess I don't know, is it anybody's fault? Maybe nobody's fault. It's not a great look, Peter. Like we're talking and we're worried about the pitch affecting two semi-finals of your Irish Cup. Now, it may be better come Friday and Saturday. I don't actually know. Who knows? But it's just put a bit of a dampener on it. The fact that people are concerned about the pitch. What you're saying there is like the makings of a good game. You know, the likes of the Joel
I
Coopers.
think so.
Yeah, but that's negated by maybe the pitch and the underfoot conditions, and you're maybe having to try to take an extra touch to get the ball under control where you're normally used to just being able to ping the ball or whatever. And the worry would be that the pitch and the conditions may affect the quality of the game for both teams and on the Friday night as well.
You've had up and down experience with Larne this year. Like you get that first day of the season kind of squeaky win, I think I would describe it, and then you also go to Inver Park only there in January and you get thumped.
Yeah,
you get royally beaten. So it's, have you learned from that? Are you a bad mix when you go up against the big behemoths that they have in Ridley and Miller and the likes? You know, with every game it feels as though Andy Ryan, which you know well, seems to be getting stronger and stronger. Will he be, you know, two players who will be able to score a goal out of nothing is Andy Ryan and, you know, if Shevlin's doing his thing on the pitch. So like they feel like the key men in this game, but it's who's going to squeeze more opportunities out of them, I wonder.
Yeah, like Coleraine in recent times, as you say, the last couple of meetings against Larne, I mean, one of them at Inver Park, they got absolutely, they were thrashed, and Rory Higgins was as angry that night, I think, as I've seen him for a long, long time. Yeah, they were no match for Larne. So that's not a great omen from a Coleraine perspective going into Saturday's game. What I would say, though, that game in January, maybe you had Mark Connolly was just in the door, maybe one or two others. Mark Coyle, he hasn't played against Larne this year yet, so immediately you've got a player in there, vastly experienced, good player, competitive, will definitely have an influence on the game.
Will Shevlin play?
Not sure. He hasn't played the last couple. Bit of an injury doubt, I think,
Mm-hmm.
Peter. So whether he plays or not, I think Coleraine played on Saturday with no recognisable striker on the team. So doesn't bode well, does it? Mm-hmm.
It's your back line. I think we know what Larne can do, but sometimes Coleraine have been found
Yeah.
wanting from a concentration point of view. I
Mm.
mean, if you're not on your A game for a game like this, I don't know when you will be. I think the safe money's on Larne eventually just squeaking by, being patient. But there's something about it where I think in a game of perhaps short on those clear cut, or maybe a game that just has an overabundance on them, I there's something about it. I just think maybe Coleraine are going to take their chances or just get more juice out of the squeeze on that pitch. And
It's Larne overwhelming favourites, really, aren't they? Given
I don't think they're overwhelming, but you're welcome to play those head games if you wish.
certainly
It's
not.
it's how Coleraine start, all right? Because there's another scenario here where you're 2-0 down after 15 minutes, if I'm being totally honest.
Mm.
And then it's we're falling apart. So I think, as always in these games, a strong start is key. You also don't want to blow yourself out
No.
after a really strong 20 minutes, and then it's a route one ball that gets you in behind. I think you have a team that feels very assured, very experienced, and quite wily in Larne. And Coleraine just feel like they kind of jumped up young pups, but sometimes that energy is good in a game
Mm.
like this. So I think Larne are favourites. I'm going to go for Coleraine to sneak by.
Well, I get what you're saying, Peter. Larne, or I said earlier, like Larne are just like a machine. It's just all the parts just seem to work and all the rest. But perhaps, like as you say, maybe Korean have had a little bit of maybe a little bit of unknown or a wee bit of
Well,
magic, maybe
look, I'll say
that could
this.
win you a game out of nothing.
Absolutely. I will say this, though. They weren't blow away impressive against Cliftonville at home. We saw how they played against Glentoran in the Irish Cup, where I felt as though Glentoran were better. And I think if Coleraine could just avoid the mistakes that were able to let
Yeah.
Larne in from a Glentoran point of view, I think Coleraine are difficult because of how much attacking and how precise and how penetrative they can be. And that's where I think you could get the goals in that stadium, because it's not Inver Park, and Larne don't need to choke out the game and just get that point. In turn, if it's 5 minutes before penalties, I'd be throwing 12 men into that box, because
Mm.
Larne are not the team you want to be playing a big game in with
No,
penalties.
Rowan Ferguson's got a bit of previous, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have been there, done that. Got the souvenir T-shirt and the European bonus. So yeah, I
Although
will.
to be fair, Ryan Schofield has a bit of a knack of saving penalties recently. He saved one from Pat Hubin, saved one from
Yeah.
Fraser Bryden a couple of weeks back against Crusaders. So yeah, but Rowan Ferguson, he's the king.
So that's the Irish Cup semis. We do have some games in the league to talk about over the weekend, both on Saturday, 3 o'clock. Hashtag Tradish. Ballymena are still being listed by the Irish League on social media as in the relegation dogfight. They are, what, 8 points off? No, what are they?
8 points clear of the
Yeah,
cruise.
8 points. 8 points clear
Yeah, I think
cruise.
they're safe.
You know, but you never know. Uh, so they go against Bangor. Bangor, who are looking maybe officially safe, but pretty much safe. You know, anything that's not a loss there for Ballymena pretty much gets them sweet. But they have got to do it. It might be a kind of weird fixture here up at Ballymena as they trundle along to the end of the season. This feels like a bit of a draw game to me.
Yeah, I think.
2-2-1-1.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't put a draw out of the question. Or if not a draw, I would go for a Ballymena. Ballymena win, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, I just think Ballymena probably given the home advantage for what it's worth. I think they'll maybe just edge it. I think maybe 2-1 to Ballymena United in that fixture.
Fair. I think that has low key crazy game potential, like 4-3 out of nowhere
Yeah,
potential.
yeah,
But
it could be.
we'll sit tight and cross our fingers. And then Mid Ulster Derby, a huge deal to Glenavon at home as well against a Portadown team, who they actually beat at home only a couple of weeks ago, as reporting from. So Portadown on 36, Glenavon on 25. With what 12 games to go, I mean, if they really want to, they could overtake their mid-Ulster rivals. I don't think they will, but you know, after drawing at home against Crusaders, this is not an all-conquering Portadown team at the minute. So you've got to feel as though Glenavon are strong favourites going into this.
Yeah, I've watched Glenavon a couple of times at Moorview Park this year, and when they get the crowd behind them down there, that they're a hard team to work with. I do think Glenavon probably, for want of a better description, will want it more on Saturday. Maybe yes, it's a mid Ulster derby and there's the bragging rights and everything else, but I just think Glenavon's need is more than Portadown's for the win. And I do think they'll throw whatever it takes to get the win. From Portadown's point of view, I mean, they're sitting there, they're safe, they're not going up, they're not going down, they're just kind of seeing out the season, if you like. Yes, there's obviously contracts to play for and futures to play for, but when it comes down to it, Peter, in sport, it's whoever wants it most generally wins. And in this particular occasion, Glenavon will, there's no doubt, will want to win it more than Portadown because they need the points. And for me, 2-0 home win to Glenavon.
Yeah, I think so too. We will not go massively like in depth into this Tuesday, but it does feel as though if results go a certain way on Saturday, followed up by the Tuesday games, it could really change things up. So we're not going to go through the Tuesday games, but I am somewhat weirdly non-committal to a Tuesday podcast in that the next time, listener, you may hear me, it could be Monday before the Tuesday. It might be a podcast that we record after the Tuesday games. Could be a Wednesday or Thursday pod. I'll just have to see. So if you're listening to this ahead of time, make sure you go and follow the podcast, because that way you'll be able to get notification telling you if and when it's up. There will be a podcast next week. I just don't know if it's at the regular time or slightly later. So I would say, Damian, unless there's a mad swing of things, that's probably the final time we're chatting before the end of the season. Super, super quick. Where is your mind at if you were voting on Player of the Year at the minute? Is what I've been asking people.
Oh, God. Across the Irish League?
Well, you can talk about the Finnish League if you want, but I'm not really here to argue with whatever your choice is.
Jeez, that's very funny, Peter.
Thank
You
you.
taking the hand out of me. Player of the Year. And so already I'm kind of like, well, I should be looking at somebody from Larne, but I haven't really seen Larne a lot. Linfield, I haven't seen an awful lot. I've seen Glentoran quite a bit.
Is there anybody from Coleraine that you think people are maybe not backing in the manner that they should, or has been going under the radar? Because I would say for most fans, it's Pat Hubin. Maybe I'm the one. I mean, the boys from around the ground said this was a woke tech to put in Rowan Ferguson, but I think it's those two plus one.
Well,
in my
if
head.
you're asking me for a Player of the Year, I'll say Joe Cooper.
Okay, well let's
Say
throw him
Joe
in.
Cooper
But
because he's got what did I say? 21 goals, 18 in the league. He's been the sort of shining light for Coleraine and numerous games this year. Like in his previous employment at Linfield, he's probably won Coleraine games in the same way as won Linfield games last year, not on his own, but he had a large part to play in it. He scores goals, but more than that, and we talked about it earlier, Peter, it's his all-round enthusiasm for the game, his willingness to act as part of a team. Because you could easily be like, I'm a big star here, but there is none of that. So on those for those reasons, I will say Joel Cooper.
Okay, he's the one in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if he can go back to back. Was he player of the year overall last
I
year?
think he
Maybe
was.
just
Yeah.
in spirit. Well, I must say, as first seasons go for the feeling of was he going to turn up and deliver in some might say a lesser team, I think he's definitely caught jumps, and maybe a bit like Larne, his contributions to the league has went under the radar because we're so used to that. We want somebody new and exciting to get excited about, not the player who's been the best player in the league for a couple of years now. So I'll note that when it comes to my considerations. But Mr. Mullan, great to chat to you as always.
Yes.
Enjoy the last 2 furlongs of this season, and I will chat to you again very soon.
Thank you very much, Peter. As ever, great talking to you. And just from a Korean perspective, it's just nice to have a bit of interest at the final throes of the season, isn't it? On 2 fronts, so can't argue with that.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see what role you play and where this title and the Irish Cup goes.
We do.
Chat to you soon.
See you soon, Peter. Thank you.
My oh my, Irish Cup semi-finals. What, 4 games and a bit to go in the league. We're wrapping up fast, and as I just said there, I mean, you need to be subscribed, need to be following this podcast because dates may move. We'll see if we'll get one out for Tuesday. I might just move things around because by the time you listen to it, so much may have altered and changed. And look, it's Easter weekend. People want to chill, people want to relax. I'm looking at you. You're probably sitting there going, I'm going to be kipping most of the time. I won't have time to listen to an out-of-date podcast. But we will see what goes down, because if it's big, juicy, tasty, you know I'll struggle not to talk about it. So I'll see you this time next week, as I always do. It's Kick a Match on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Be good, be careful, enjoy the chocolate. Chat to you soon.